Welcome to ShelterPoint Training. This covers how to enter and exit clients from the ShelterPoint module and service point. Please note that while it will be important to use EDA mode if applicable, backdate mode cannot be used in ShelterPoint. As a result, it is always essential to check that the dates are correct when entering and exiting your client in ShelterPoint. Let's get started. To go to ShelterPoint, we'll go to the left-hand side and click on the Shelter button. I'm just going to minimize the left-hand navigation bar here to give us a little bit more room to work with. And so first of all, we're going to want to make sure that we have the correct provider, which I have for my HMIS training program. This will be the same as the EDA mode. The unit list is the unit list we'll be pulling from. So there are programs that have multiple lists and multiple shelters. In that case, you would see a different listing depending on what shelter you wanted. I just have my first default training beds unit list here. But once you have selected the list that you want, simply click Submit. Down below, this is the shelter's dashboard. We have a number of buttons. The most important buttons on this page will be the Check Client In and the View All. The Check Client In and the View All buttons will take you to the same location. Now, you could hold all beds at once, but that is rarely used. You can also print ID cards, which is also rarely used. But you can contact the HMIS team for more information on that. The update confirmation list and the transmit today's checkout list are generally used by larger shelters. We're just going to cover the Check Client In and the View All button, which as stated are the same, and we'll see the functionality when we click there. So I'll start with the View All here. And so on this page, we see a list of all of the beds, the rooms, and the floors in our particular shelter. And we see the status of them, whether they're empty or held. And to hold the bed, you would simply click Hold, and it would hold the bed until the client that you wanted to come actually came to the shelter. So I'm going to click on Hold here on bed 1. And as you can see, it changed to held. Once your client came to the shelter, we would release that hold by clicking on held. Now there are two ways to enter a person into ShelterPoint. The first is the green plus sign on the left side here. The second is by clicking the empty text next under the client column. So I'll start by clicking the empty here next to bed 1. Now this takes us to a search page, and you should be familiar with it if you took the HMIS introductory series. I happen to already know my client ID, so I'm just going to enter it down below. And it will confirm because of a client having their initial check-in if we want to continue, and I will. And so you'll go ahead and correct the date as appropriate at the top. As mentioned before, the backdate mode is not possible in ShelterPoint, so putting it in here at the moment is the appropriate time to do so. In addition to changing the dates, it does give us the option to be able to include supplies given, locker number, and codes or notes. But what we really want to focus on here is the household members section. If you're checking in a single person, this won't be relevant to you. But if you do have a family, you want to make sure that you have that you include every additional family member, which I'm going to do currently, and it's going to confirm that this is their first day, and continuing. And you'll include them here because otherwise they won't be included in the check-in. Once you've completed that, you'll scroll to the bottom here and click Save and Exit, and you'll see your family as at the top here. And by keeping this sorted by group ID, we keep our 3 family members together. We do have the options to be able to change by floor or room or bed or client, the date of birth and gender, whatever might be most appropriate for your agency. But by keeping it sorted by group ID, that'll keep family members together. As you can see, our 2 additional family members are currently on overflow beds. This is completely normal. Now, there are times where there's a lot of different people and many beds are held, and you want to make sure that you see all the related people at once. Having the family separated can be inconvenient. So like I said, we're going to keep that all together. Now there's additional features on ShelterPoint that you can access by clicking on the client's name. So I'll start with my head of household and clicking on their name. If needed, you could change their unit that they're currently assigned to by clicking on Assign Unit and picking a different location. But I'm going to keep it as is on floor 1, room 1, bed 1. And then I will go ahead and scroll down and exit because I did not make any changes. Now, we want to make sure that we do not change the date in field because it's really important for checking the client into the project and recording that they've entered the shelter at your project. Whether or not they're in what unit is not as important for recording, so we will always leave the date in the same. And if we want to change the unit, we'll do that without changing the date. Let's take a quick look here. We're going to scroll down, and if we and by realizing that, well, what if we had a family member that wasn't intended to be there? We would click on their name, and in this case we have the son, and realize they were not intended to they did never checked in, even though we put them in. So we can come in here and delete this shelter stay. And so sometimes that could happen. We thought that we had the full family being checked in, but there might be somebody that did not show up. Perhaps a child that is going to stay with grandparents, or another option. Whatever it might be, we can click that and click delete. And so now you can see that we only have our 2 remaining household members, Bob and Patty. Now for Patty, she's still listed as being on overflow. We want to go ahead and change that and assign a bed to her. So I'm going to click on her name, and again, we don't want to change the date in. We just want to come here to the unit number and assign it. And so I'm going to assign the bed right next to her husband and give bed 2 and select. And then I will scroll down and I will save and exit. And as you can see, now I have, with our same check-in date, floor 1, room 1, beds 1 and 2 for Bob and Patty. In addition, we're able to come over here and confirm that they are the same group ID. By having the same group ID, we know that is a household. We're able to see their date of birth and their gender information. Now, another functionality that I want to be able to show is by clicking on a client's name. I'll click on Bob's name, and if we scroll to the bottom here, instead of exiting out of ShelterPoint, I can go on here and just jump to their profile, and it'll give me a confirmation that yes, I do want to go to their profile. And much of this you've seen before through our introductory training, that we have options to look at their profile, their household information, any entry exits. And now that they have created a shelter stay, we can see that in the service transactions for that client. And along with any other prior shelter stays here, within this dashboard for service transactions, we can view on shelter stays and see that our client, Bob, checked in on the 23rd, the provider, the unit list, the bed, and the type. In the moment, I'm going to go ahead and go back. I need to open up the navigation controls. I want to go back to shelters. And I want us to go ahead and this time by clicking client check client in. And we'll see that it's ultimately the exact same page as the view all. The final thing we want to cover in here is how to be able to exit a client. To do so, we'll simply go ahead and check the red minus sign next to somebody. We want to be able to check out Bob, and so I'll click on check out. At the top, it will have the checkout date. If it's today, it defaults to today, but if we wanted to do a prior date, we could do so by clicking on which date. And one of the things that need to be included here is in bold that the reason for leaving, and there's a multitude of reasons that somebody would leave an agency. We're going to go ahead and say that Bob has completed the program, and then it asks us to give a sub reason or sub explanation with the destination. Sometimes things are less ideal, and then sometimes things have more positive outcomes, such as transitional housing as opposed to an emergency shelter, or providing actual permanent housing information. I'm going to go ahead and choose that they're going to transitional housing. And as noted, I had yesterday's date, and I want to go ahead and save and exit, and then I will return to the shelters and to view them all, and note that now I only have Patty in here, but not her husband. Now that's important to note, because when exiting a member of a household, it does not exit the whole household, so you do need to go in and exit one at a time. So I will go ahead and exit Patty as well, and she exited on the 11th, completing the program and go into transitional housing, and then I will save her as well. And now if I were to go to our shelters, I can see that I no longer have any clients that are listed as currently occupying a bed in our agency. They're all empty. If I wanted to come to my client that had previously checked in, I can come to their transactions and see that they had a transaction where they start a shelter stay starting on the 23rd. They exited on the 11th of January. And now exit them. And that is everything that we needed to cover with the training on ShelterPoint. We appreciate you watching, and we hope you have a wonderful day.